Hey everyone, Nubkeks here. I hope you're having a great holiday, a great Christmas season. I got my favorite thing. I got this new dressing gown. You guys who've been watching the channel know I do like wearing my dressing gowns, but this one has a hood, so I can pretend to be a wizard. Absolutely incredible, love it. But yeah, I haven't made a video in a few days now because of Christmas. So I said, hey, you know what? I'll come back and make a video. I was gonna do something a little bit boring, perhaps, looking at simming your character. I decided though, let's be a bit more exciting and let's look at just a bigger video on how to do really good DPS. You know, how to be, one of the top performers in your team, in your Mythic Plus, etc. You know, how do you do a really good job? What are actually the steps to doing that? So let's take a look. Again, to give you an idea, like I played Demon Hunter Havoc in Nyalotha. So you can see, this isn't the best in the world, but it's pretty good. So I'm only talking half out of my arse, I suppose you could say. Again, this is a site called Warcraft logs. We're going to be using this a lot. This is for raiding, really. And this can give you just an insane amount of info. It actually kind of surprised me. I realized, making these videos, I take Warcraft logs for granted. A lot of people really don't know about it, though. And that can make a huge difference. It gives you loads of info to improve as a player. So tip number one, then, is understanding these rankings, especially from the perspective of DPS. It's a lot more complicated with healing and so on. Essentially what these are doing is it's a percentile. So this is like 95th percentile, 0.1 overall. This means that my best average DPS is better than 95.1% of Havoc Demon Hunters in Nyalotha. Okay, that's cool. Maybe even more important, though, is the median, right? The median, this is like your more average performance. You can see that's substantially worse. And that probably matters more because it's not about just your very best pull, but it's kind of about being consistent is perhaps more important. To give you an idea, obviously, you wouldn't expect that stuff to be that high. This was our last pull, unfortunately. Before Christmas break, we didn't quite kill Sardonathrius Heroic, unfortunately. We got him to 7%, though. And to give you an idea of these rankings, then, this is me. You can see these different color rankings comparing you to different players. And I often see people really misunderstand how these are to be used. So, for example, our overall raid DPS was only like 36% for all raids, so that's actually pretty low. But yeah, a lot of people misunderstanding what this means and how to read it. Like I've seen some things on how to read these parse colors and numbers, and they're completely crazy. The general rule is, the general way I would look at it, this is for progress, right? This is when you're killing a boss for the first time. Your stuff is always going to be lower. When you're on farm, you're going for like the 99s, the 100s. You're trying to do as much damage as possible for fun. That's what you're going to be doing on farm. When you can kind of ignore mechanics and cheese fights like that, but you've got much more reasonable expectations when you're actually doing a fight for the first time. And generally how I would approach it is, okay, these are gray, right? Gray is really bad. A gray log is really bad. Bearing in mind, most people that are getting these gray logs, a good percentage of them are probably dead for the whole fight or for big chunks of the fight. So we could see, like, if we looked at our balance druids, well, they're not actually dead for that long. So for example, we could go get some more info on that and figure out what's going on. Green logs is, again, you might be doing okay, but you're probably underperforming. It's probably not great, and there's probably some fairly big improvements you could make as well. I think when you're getting blue logs on progress, and we got a few blues here. I got blue 66. Like you're doing pretty decent. I think that's, you're doing good. You're doing well. That's okay. That's fine. Purples, as we see here, they're really good. If you're getting a purple log on progress, like, you're doing absolutely excellent. It's highly rare that you get something like this, a 95%. This is a healer doing DPS, so it's a little different. That's super rare on progress, so I'm blocking it with my head. That's amazing if you get it, but again, that's generally speaking what you're shooting for. I would generally say, like, for the first time I'm killing a boss, I kind of want to be getting, like, I want to aim for a blue log. I'll probably get some greens, but then I know that I could definitely improve. I want to be looking for a blue. So for example, over here, we might go, like, why are we getting, like, we're not dead, so what's going on here? And we could compare, right? We can compare. So let's go grab the rankings. Whoop, let's grab the rankings. So this is Sardonathrius. It's kind of zoomed in here, so it's a little more awkward to get around. Heroic, there's no public mythic logs yet, obviously. we're going to go for all classes, and let's stick in our balance druid, and let's figure out what's going on here. Going to come back to this in a minute because this is really important. Let's grab one that's in English. This one obviously isn't in English. Let's take a look. Okay. In fact, I actually came back here, guys. I've rewind slightly. It's actually on heroic. We've got some insanely good players. So obviously pieces are insane. They're one of the top European guilds. We're actually going to go look at, for example, let's be very unfair to my raid team and compare them to Complexity Limit. These are the world first. They are the best raid team in the world. That was pieces. Let's look at Complexity Limit. So what's he doing? And you can sort of then go in and you can compare like your damage sources. I'll pick on the officer, not the other guy. That's a bit more fair. So like the damage sources, okay, we have a similar number of casts. He's just doing way more damage with those starfalls, though. You could, for example, another thing you could do is you could look at damage to enemies. That might be a big part of it. Are we hitting different things? So Sergeant Athris, we've 1 million damage. We've got 1.8 million damage here from Goop D2. Now, obviously, his gear is going to be better, but that's still a pretty big difference, right? That's still a big difference. So let's see. We've got like our item level overall is only 201. This guy's probably way higher over here. 216. That's a massive, massive difference. So that's going to account for a lot of it. We can see that 17% of his damage was to Echo of Sin. If we compare over here, only 7% of our damage here is to Echo of Sin. So that's quite a big difference. Crimson Cabalists, we're doing like 8%ish, 200k compared to 19%. 300k, so we're doing more here to the Crimson Kabbalists, Remornia. You can sort of get this idea. You can compare and then sort of go in and start figuring out like what is happening, where are things going differently, what is based off of gear, and what is actually hitting different targets. In terms of preparing then, again, Warcraft Logs gives you some insanely useful information when you go into your particular spec. So we can see here for the balance druids, look at this stuff up at the top. Let's zoom it in actually so it's even easier to see. Zoom out a bit so there's more info. Top 100 breakdown. These are the top 100 players. What talents are they using? Every single one is using Nature's Balance at tier 15. And you can see it kind of goes across. You can see, okay, there's a little bit of a difference here between Soul of the Forest and Star-Lord. And again, we've got some tiers here which are just completely set. You can see what trinkets they're using. What are the trinkets that they have? Then you can also look at their top Covenant abilities, right? You can also look at their top conduits. You can look at the top legendaries. So this is all stuff that you can prepare for. So for example, you know, if I was playing a balance druid, I would strongly consider, there is one Kyrian in here, but this is very, very dramatically leaning towards the Night Fae, so I certainly consider that. Covenant choice obviously is not something you can play around. So for example, if you are not a Night Fae balance druid, for whatever crazy reason, you could go down and find an example. This is a very one-dimensional class. Okay, here, I mean, like Goosey here, if you're Kyrian, you could look at Goosey, see is he using a different build, what's he doing differently to synergize better with his Covenant ability compared to the other guys, and so on. Again, we could go into Goosey, for example, and again, we can look at Goosey. There he is, Goosey. And we can look at a summary of Goosey. We can even go in, we can look at, again, there's great info here. We can look at his overall item level was 212. We could look at his different stats. Okay, he's actually got quite a, this is quite a general spread of stats. He's not really hard stacking anything too much. We can look at his soulbinds, his conduits, his talents. You can look at his individual gear pieces. You can see what gems he's using. You can see what enchantments he's using. You can get a really good idea for it. Again, you can see the breakdown of his damage sources, his healing sources, what he's taking damage from. You can get loads of that info to just prepare you so that even without knowing too much about a particular fight, at least making sure that you have the right talents when you step into that fight, that you've got a good setup for your gear, and so on, right? That you're setting yourself up for success by having a good idea for what the top guys are doing. For Mythic Plus, you can do a similar thing with Raider.io. So for example, we can go into spec leaderboards. Let's go with the balance druids again, just to keep things consistent. So we can look at some of these top balance druids. Okay, let's look at this Krona guy. Let's check out what he's doing. Let's grab a couple of his dungeons, you know, and let's go take a look. Okay, so this is a fortified week. What's he running on fortified? So he's gone with Night Fae. That's what he's running. These are his conduits. This is his legendary, his trinkets. You can see his talent build right here. Okay, cool. And again, these are all fortified. Okay, this might be a little bit bad at the start of the expansion. But we could, for example, try, look through and get some ideas. We can compare it to some different guys. Here we go. Perfect. This is what I was hoping for. A tyrannical. Okay. Different affixes. Is he running a different build? You see, this time he was actually Kyrian for this one. He had different conduits. I think it's still the same legendary. Possibly a different talent build. Again, you could take the time to go into this, see what sort of composition they're running with. Is that going to change their talent build? So you can figure out what these top guys are running. Again, you could like click into him and see his gear as well. S tier across the board. Great to see. And again, you can look at here's his gear. So you can look at his item level, what particular gear is this player using. So if you're a big Mythic Pluser, this is what you can do. If you're into PvP, I'm not really into PvP, so I can't particularly tell you what the best source would be for that. Maybe check out some of the pro leagues there. I know they stream lots of tournaments for that official tournaments. Maybe check those out and see what they're running in those, and you'll get sort of like an idea for what the best guys are using. You can use the same. For the next tip then is having a good UI that gives you the core information you need to play your spec well in combat. Okay, this is gonna be super important. The default UI is kind of bad. You don't want to be looking down on your action bars or scrolling through your buff bars, like what buffs do I have, how is my spec working, blah blah blah. You want to use add-ons to make sure that that info is is clear. This is quite a personal thing. There's lots of different things you can do. This is my setup, relatively basic, I would say. These are my weak auras. I put my weak aura packs up on my Patreon. You can go grab them there for free. I've got a few different classes and specs up there. Some of them not fully up to date. It kind of depends on what I'm actually playing at the time. But this is giving me core info. So on the right hand side, let me spend that conduit ability. We've got kind of major cooldowns are going on that side, and then more core rotational stuff I have here on the left. You can see my insanity here for my Shadow Priest is also displayed. Look at this. This is one example. So for my debuffs, when my debuff, it's really important to maintain these at all times for Shadow Priest. So when they're not on the target, right? When they're not on the target, if I swap to a different target, I've got them glowing. Oh, warning, go get those debuffs on as quickly as possible. You can see when they start to run out, then they glow, but look, they go colored. Now, when they're on safely, these things are grayed out. It's all good. Everything is fine. They're missing, they're glowing. And then for every sort of debuff in the game, there's something called a pandemic window where it's efficient to refresh it. So you can see Shadow Pain just went colored there. That means I can refresh it safely. Vamp Touch just went colored. That means I could refresh it safely. So you want to go and find that info for your spec on when you want to refresh your debuffs so that you're not wasting global cooldowns, reapplying them too early, and just sort of track that stuff. And again, tracking your major cooldowns. So for example, if I fire off a Void Torrent, okay, that's a 30-second cooldown. It's not the biggest cooldown in the world, but like if we just sort of faff about and do our rotation badly here, the important thing is that I'm keeping an eye on this. I know when it's coming back. So when there's like, let's say 10 seconds or 5 seconds on that cooldown, I know that I want to prepare for it. And I want to start considering it. So, okay, Void Torrent's coming back soon. Void Torrent is a big channel. It generates lots of insanity. So we're going to definitely want to try to dump our insanity before it comes in. Here we go. And look at this. Bam, I'm right in with that GCD, right into that Void Torrent. Why am I able to do that? Because that information is there. It's clear for me. There we go. That's another great weak aura. Shows me Power of Fortitude isn't on someone in my group. In that case, me, it fell off. That information, though, it's clear, right? So it's about presenting the core information of playing your spec well, clearly. The next tip then, in terms of actually playing your spec well, now that you know the builds that the best players are using, now that you've hopefully got a decent UI setup, or maybe even to help you set up that UI, you need to know what to actually do. I really recommend checking out a guide. I actually find that for looking at rotation stuff, I generally prefer the Wowhead guides, but for rotations and for spell info, I actually really do like the Icy Veins guides. Generally, I feel they're actually quite good and they can contain extra info that Wowhead sometimes doesn't have. Like I was looking at I'm starting an Affliction Warlock alt today actually, because I'm considering swapping off Affliction from Shadow Priest off to Affliction Warlock for some of our later progress, because for us it's going to take months to clear through Mythic, Castle Nathria, right? And I think Affliction is looking a lot better on especially like Sarge and Athris, which is gonna be probably the hardest boss when we get there. Anyway, but yeah, you can like put in your thing, and this is going to give you again info on your single target rotation. What are your priorities? Blah blah blah. Really nice here is it's also going to show you what your opening rotation should be. This is what your ideal opening rotation is going to be, which can prep you really well for what to do. The general rule for major cooldowns is going to be the more often that you use them, the more effective it's going to be, right? Your major cooldowns, it depends on your spec, but for most specs, they're going to be the biggest source of your damage. They are the big things that amp up your damage, take it to the next level. So consider this. Again, I'm using Void Torrent as an example here because it's such a short cooldown, right? If I'm really slow, if I'm very bad at doing this, I could lose out seconds. Like let's say if I'm 5 seconds late on pressing Void Torrent every single time, if I'm that slow, if I'm not prepared, if I'm not thinking ahead, then it's not a 30-second cooldown, it's a 35-second cooldown. And over the course of, let's say, a 5-minute fight, someone that is prepared, is using it properly, is going to get more out of it. So let's say right now, like we're coming into it, I'm kind of going, oh, I'm kind of slow to go for this, and then, oh, I can't cast it now, I have too much insanity, so I've got to dump my insanity, oh, I've got to refresh my dots, I better generate a bit of sanity, okay, now I'm going into my Void Torrent. I've lost a lot of time there. That's a lot of time where this ability was sat, not being used. And as a general rule, that's going to be lost DPS. And it's going to be the same for all of these. Power Infusion is a big 2-minute cooldown that gives me 25% haste for 20 seconds. Void Eruption, this is my biggest cooldown. 1.5-minute CD puts me in Void form for 15 seconds. Gives me Void Bolt, lots more damage. I want to make sure to be tracking that, to always be aware of it. And again, tracking it, knowing I'm planning, 10 seconds before it comes up, I'm planning ahead, setting myself up well, ready to go into that rotation. That's really important. Your cooldowns are really important. And then, of course, maintaining your core rotation as well. Again, the opening rotation will help you with this. This is going to, show you because, going into it, okay, like which cooldown do I use first? What do I do first? Do I put my dots on? What order do I put my dots on? I've got all of these cooldowns. You want me to use them all, but I can't use them all at the same time. There's a global cooldown. What order do I do? Your opening rotation guide, again, Icy Veins tends to be very good for this, will show you what to do. So, put on my 2 dots. It recommends going into Void Torrent. Shadow Crash is a talent I don't have, so maybe that's a little bit inaccurate there. They usually have buttons you can tick to filter out some of this stuff. This doesn't appear to have it, unfortunately. Do a Mind Blast if you need to. Then you're going to, cast Shadow Fiend, do your Void Eruption, Power Infuse right after, Potion, Void Bolt, Mind Games, Devouring Plague, regular single target rotation. And again, this is going to be the priority for your regular rotation. This stuff can be overwhelming at the start. It can be very intimidating, but it is really important. Look, I mean, you're not going to do good damage if you can't actually do your core rotation properly. So that's just a straightforward fact. The opening rotation, though, can be unintuitive, so it's good to track that. And again, just become familiar with your priorities. And your goal really is to be able to do your core rotation without ever really thinking about it, right? It's something that should just happen naturally. You should be doing it effectively, right? So I can come in, like put my dots on, like whatever. We'll use some of these more minor cooldowns. That's okay, just to get them used. So we'll spend our insanity, go into Mind Games. Here we go. Mind Blast is coming back up, so we're going to do that. Drop in another Devouring Plague. This is actually a little bit unfair. Reapply my dots. This is a little bit unfair because I do have some PvP talents that are making Devouring Plague last longer and stuff like that. But you see, I'm able to talk here. I have to pay a little bit of attention to doing the rotation, but for the most part, the core rotation is usually not that crazy difficult. The weak auras are really helping here to make this effective. Here we go. Actually, I need to cast that, so I maybe should make that one glow. I'm not exactly sure how to make it glow, but I'm sure I could set up some particular way to make it glow. And just using these core rotations, I'm able to keep that going. I'm not doing any movement or anything, but I'm talking. But it's flowing, and you need to be that comfortable with it. You could try do something like this, into the mirror to yourself. You can see there I actually messed up because I was talking. So it is hard. But yeah, be comfortable with that core rotation. A lot of that comes with practice, but it also comes from learning your guide, following it, and making sure that you have this stuff tracked. Okay, so we got that sort of basic stuff. Let's go a little bit more advanced here. Let's go a little bit more advanced, and let's look at this, for example. This was our last Shriekwing heroic kill, so I did fairly well there, decently well. So we could take a look. You see our Affliction Warlock did really... You know what? Let's actually look at him instead. Let's look at him because he was absolutely blasting, right? So let's look at Crasher here. So again, we could look at this as an example for a log, and we could start breaking it down, and we can see when is he using abilities, what is he doing. So you could compare this to your log on the fight, and again, you could check, right? Advanced stuff. Compare your casts, okay? So maybe he's casting way more Malefic Raptures than me. Okay, that's interesting. You could also go into individual things. You can see this is where his Malefic Raptures are popping off, so he's clearly banking these things. Here's another really interesting thing you could do. Again, maybe a little bit more advanced here. Well, it's still fairly basic, but important. Okay, let's look at this. What are the big cooldowns for Affliction Warlock? Because remember, I said a general rule for doing good DPS is using your cooldowns on cooldown. Well, that's great if you're fighting a target dummy, but when it comes into actual fights, sometimes you want to delay things, mix them up a bit. You don't necessarily want to always be using them on cooldown. We can look here for Summon Dark Glare, which is a 3-minute cooldown. You can see he's using it 7 seconds into the fight. Obviously, for Affliction Warlock, they want to put dots on because Summon Dark Glare, it does extend the duration of your damage over time effects, which are active on all enemies. Hopefully, I don't have my camera screen up, so hopefully I'm not blocking this with my head. But he hangs out for 20 seconds. We could look at Dark Soul Misery, so he's just precasting that as well. Interesting here, for example, he did Dark Soul Misery at 2 minutes, and then he did his Dark Glare here at 3:26. Quite intriguing there. Perhaps you could get even more damage out, perhaps, if... because bear in mind, with Shriekwing has phases where she's invulnerable. So perhaps if he was more prepared for that, he could have potentially get even more damage out of this going, okay, well, she's invulnerable for these times, and she's going to be dead by 341. So, you know, like this Summon Dark Glare, 326, it's a 3-minute cooldown. So it's been sat there on cooldown for an extra 20 seconds more than it necessarily needed to be. If I move this back to, if I could pull it off at 307, 007, perhaps I could do it at 307. It's a 20-second CD, so it's going to get the full value then. And I could delay my Dark Soul Misery, have the two of those stacked together, stacking those cooldowns, maybe get more out of it, right? That is something to consider. In fact, let's see, am I talking on my arse, or is this actually true? Let's double check it, right? Let's look for rankings. Again, you know, use this info, compare. We're going to go in here. It's so much more awkward to navigate this zoomed in, but it makes it easier for you guys to see it. If we look at an Affliction Warlock, this is on Mythic. We keep it on Mythic. Same sort of fight length, 340. Okay, let's knock it down to Heroic, and let's get a similar fight length. That's also another thing to consider. Check out your other fight lengths. So 341, here we go. Eddie Lock, exactly same fight length. Let's see what Eddie Lock did. Eddie Lock did 4.9 DPS. Crasher did, again, really good DPS player, Crasher. How much damage did he do total? 4.4. That's an extra 500,000. Now, some of that is going to come from gear, but nonetheless, let's take a look at this here. So you can see if we compare Crasher here, Crasher had another big burst of damage here, bigger one than him. Eddie Lock had a better on pull, and then Crasher did a big medium burst here, and then a smaller burst there. Eddie Lock, he delayed it, so let's take a look. I imagine that he has done this. We'll go into his casts. Let's take a look here. Dark Soul Misery, okay. 7 seconds in, and then 304. I imagine we're going to see that Summon Dark Glare. Yeah, there you go. It's synced up, right? So this is the sort of thing you're thinking about. You're looking at this. You're looking at the fight length. How long is the fight? What are the phases? Okay, there's an immunity phase. There is an immunity phase on Shriekwing where you can't hit the boss. So where am I going to fit my cooldowns into this to make the most damage happen? You could do the same sort of thing. You can do the same sort of thing with looking at AoE. When are the ads spawning in? When there's there? If you look at something like Sludge Fist, you know, when are the vulnerability phases? Syncing up my cooldowns with those vulnerability phases. This is the sort of stuff that you can look at, and again, compare it to the top guys and see what are they doing, where are they using their stuff. It can be really helpful. Another thing you can do here is you can click on timelines, right? And we could look at this is his cast order. So again, remember we looked at in the last bit your opening rotation. You can actually see it in action over here, which is really cool on this timeline. It might be a little bit intimidating and so on, but you can see so he's going to be applying Unstable Affliction. He's going to put on Agony, Corruption, Siphon Life. He's going to start draining life. Applies then his Phantom Singularity. Does Soul Rot. That's his Covenant ability. Then he's popped his trinkets here, and he's starting to pop. There are probably more stuff that we can't see. Yeah, there we go. Sorry. So he did his soul rot. He went into Dark Soul Misery, summoned in his Dark Lair. He had his Racial and his trinket popped with his summon Dark Lair, popped his potion during the GCD because it's off GCD. And then there we go. He's got 5 Raptures in a row. And he's into Drain Soul, reapplies Haunt, Rapture, Drain Soul, blah, blah, blah. So you can actually see this stuff and you can compare it to yourself and get an idea for what's going on. Again, I imagine for like, if we look at our Warlock, again, it'd probably be something very similar. Look at that timeline and we can see, again, it's almost the exact same thing. He's applying those. You can see like, okay, maybe applying Corruption before applying Siphon Life is actually slightly better, blah, blah, blah. Maybe there's a bit of damage lost there. Again, you get the idea. It's just sort of this min-maxing approach, getting the absolute maximum damage. And this is in a way that isn't negatively impacting. This is just getting your opener right, getting your spell order right. Let's compare it to me. I probably did it wrong as well. You know, it's something to improve. So I'm going to open with the Mind Blast, apply my dot. What's that? I actually chugged a potion at the start. That's probably okay with Bloodlust. Void Torrent. Then we're looking at Persona 5 Strikers. Really annoying to maneuver this when you're zoomed in, but just for you guys so you can see. Again, someone in the Shadow Fiend, go into Void Torrent, Void Bolt with a Power Infusion, Devouring Plague, Mind Blast, thing. So you can see the sort of same stuff happening there. I wonder, did I get my stuff off right? I suspect I probably didn't. Let's find out. Void Eruption. Yeah, so you can see, although I got a good log, I think I could have got another Void Eruption in on Shriekwing before it phased. And then I would have got one at about 3 minutes as well. So I could have actually got 2 cooldowns there. So that's something I can go back and do better next time, right? Because if we double check Shriekwing goes invulnerable at like about like a roughly 150 something. So definitely getting the Void Eruption off again. It comes in a few seconds into the fight. I could get one at like 135. And you're going to lose some value. Just about, but I could actually squeeze another one in and get more damage in, right? So this is the thing. Go into it, look at it. I could have got more damage there, and then again, blast again around here. Same sort of thing with Crusher. The 3-minute CDs, I have the 1 minute 30. They're sort of similar. Could have got an extra one in here, done more damage overall. I don't know if there's some like movement stuff happening or whatever. There probably is, or telling the team what to do because I do raid lead. But that's something I go back the next time and do better next time, right? That's what I'm going to improve on. If you want another really good tool, which isn't always fully, it isn't always fully accurate, but it can be a good tool. So here's an example of it actually not being perfectly accurate. But this is called WowAnalyzer, and you can just stick your log into WowAnalyzer and get some really good info out of it, right? In terms of how often you're using your spells. Now, it's not going to be fully perfect. Like, okay, here it's saying that our uptime on our dots isn't quite right. I do think that this is not considering the fact that we have the, this is not the right thing. I've got so many tabs open right now, guys. Oh my Lord. Where are we? Not that, I don't know. Somewhere. Here we go. So many tabs. Yeah, I think it's not considering this like 20-second window. 20 seconds out of 3 minutes 40. Is that like, you guys can work it out. I suspect that that is probably something like 17.5% in terms of that dot uptime. Maybe I had them drop off a little bit, but yeah, I think it's not quite perfect on this, so do bear that in mind. Sometimes this isn't fully accurate for the fights, at least at the start, but they obviously keep refining the tool and improving it. But this can give you a really good idea. Just to give you an idea of some of the things it can do, is again going to show you your dot uptime. Is that falling off? It's going to show you how often were you using your core spells. Were you missing out? So I did really well on Void Bolt. Mind Blast, possibly I could go look at my log and check my gameplay. I could probably have got, excuse me, more casts out of that. Void Eruption, look at that. Again, we just looked at the log, right? We just looked through it, and I saw, and I worked out for myself, even before looking at this tool, that yeah, I missed a Void Eruption. I definitely could have got another one out there on Shriekwing for sure. The timers sync up, definitely could have. So that's something to definitely be aware of. Minimizing casting downtime is stuff where you're not casting anything, so that obviously wants to be as low as possible. We'll come back to that. It's going to show you if you're well prepared, if your stuff's enchanted, flasks, food, blah blah blah, all that stuff. It's going to give you suggestions as well in terms of what you could be doing. Again, like this is one of the things I touched on. I definitely missed a Void Eruption. That is a major problem. If I got another Void Eruption out, my damage would have been way higher. If I got a second Void, like look at the like this is my damage output. Look at this Void Eruption with Bloodlust, admittedly. Then Void Eruption, like I'm going from like getting an extra massive chunk of DPS from those Void Eruptions. Get a third one of those spikes in there. It's a huge deal. That's massively more damage. So that is absolutely something to look into for sure. So this could be a really, really good tool to help you improve. Like I said, I don't think it's taking account of the downtime on Shriekwing, but still that's a really useful thing. And again, you can also get statistics in terms of your HPS, how much you're moving, your DPS, your HPS compared to other players, blah, 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 how much damage your talents are contributing, and so on, how much of your stuff is on cooldown. There's really good info in here. Because I know these logs can be very intimidating to break this down. This sort of breaks it down in a more clean way for you. So for example, maybe this is a cleaner way to look at this. This can actually be quite interesting because you can see some gaps here. So okay, like right here, for example, I cast the Mind Blast. There's a bit of a delay there. I'm losing like a bit of a split second there going into that Void Torrent because I'm using my potion. That's lost time. That is a little bit of lost time. Perhaps I could improve that. It seems small, but it could add up. Again, right here, there's a little bit of lost time with that Mind Blast. Okay, there's some sort of movement here where I'm not casting, but look for these gaps. Here's another big chunk of time where I'm not casting anything. That's a lot of lost damage. Like that could be a fully channeled Mind Flay almost. That's a lot of lost damage and so on. So you can see these sort of things. There could be some stuff lost out. Okay, these aren't actually empty chunks. This is Void Bolt casts. But you can get an idea when you look at this. It's a good visual tool to see, oh yeah, I actually am losing like a split second between every cast. I need to queue my casts up more. I need to be spamming my buttons more. I'm wasting too much DPS potential there. Again, you can look at your cooldowns. You can see how much damage you did with those cooldowns. And yeah, again, you can see your exact cast order within the cooldown and figure it out. So for example, right here, I can instantly see a problem that Void Bolt should be every fourth spell. And this one, Power Infusion's off GCD, so that's fine. Like Void Bolt, Devouring Plague, Mind Blast, Void Bolt, Mind Games, Devouring Plague, Void Bolt. This is all good. Then I'm looking over this one. I think there's probably a mistake, right? Because I Void Bolt, 2 Devouring Plagues, Mind Blast, Void Bolt. That is probably an error. It should have been Void Bolt, 2 Devouring Plagues, Void Bolt. I shouldn't have cast that Mind Blast. You can get that sort of gist, right? You can start figuring out some of these mistakes. And again, you can look at your character details, what your stats are, blah, blah, blah. A great thing to do that I could do, for example, using our examples when we were looking at our Affliction Warlock and comparing him to another Affliction Warlock. Like, okay, so it's not accounting for this stuff properly, but what I could do, I could grab this report, then I could, bam, slap him in. Okay, Affliction Warlock, not supported. You just ruined my example, but if your spec is supported, you go in and I could compare Crusher to this absolute nutjob, Eddie Locke, who's completely crushing it on DPS. I could stick both of their things in, compare them both, and then get an idea, and then really compare like for like and go, okay, so it's accounting for, you know, both of us are lower, but maybe, for example, I'm at 82%, but maybe he's at 84%. So it's kind of going, okay, well, there is a definite 16% there. That it's not accounting for downtime, but why is he at 84 but I'm at 82? Maybe I'm actually missing out. Maybe I could attack the boss for a while, like when Shriekwing's transitioning. Maybe I'm not actually attacking Shriekwing when Shriekwing is transitioning. I get more damage out there. You get the idea, right? All right, guys, well, there you go. Let me know what other sort of tips you'd like to see. I think we covered a good chunk here in today's video, but there's obviously more that you can do. But we looked at, you know, having a good clean UI, using Warcraft logs to look at the top players, or Raider.io to look at the top players, see what builds, see what gear, what covenants, what legendaries, all the stuff that they're going for going into the fight, making sure that you have a good UI so you can get good, clean information. You know, checking to make sure that your opening rotation is clean, and then going more in depth in logs, looking at actual timings for cooldowns. And we saw, again, looking at myself, looking at one of our Affliction Warlocks, how compared to the top guys, we could actually min-max our cooldowns better, make sure your big damage cooldowns are going really well. Again, look at things like WowAnalyzer, use that as a gauge for how your core rotation is happening, okay? And again, stick in other top players in there, compare them to yourself and see how you're doing. Figure out exactly where you're falling down on, and have an open mind. That's really important. You know, like it'd be very silly to go in and like look at me and kind of be going like, well, like Void Eruption, I don't know, like, is it really worth it? You know, like, be open and go like, yeah, absolutely. Actually, if I got another Void Eruption in there, I would have done way more damage. You know, like, don't be afraid to criticize yourself and say, you know what, actually, yeah, that would have been better. I would have done better. That would have been stronger. Void Eruption here, do another one here, then delay Power Infusion, do Void Eruption over here with Power Infusion. That's way more damage. I would have done better. And yeah, again, be open in terms of, you know, are you always casting? Was your opening rotation right? All of that stuff. Check it all. Make sure you are good on that. See where you can improve and focus in then on improving. Do better next time, right? That is the key to really min-maxing your DPS. And then, of course, you know, you can push it to another level then. And, you know, when you're on farm, you can start, you know, like I was talking about. Where was it? I don't want to... I think I want to end on something like this. Hang on. Too many things. Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, here we go. So again, what I wanted to end on is like looking at this stuff. Again, have a good idea, have a good goalpost for progression. Again, be aiming for like blue on progression and then aspire to get purple. That's really, really good. You're doing great on progress because you're trying to learn a fight. You're trying to min-max a fight with a whole bunch of new mechanics and stuff, and that can be tough. So if you're like not doing too well, definitely try to improve. Then when you're on farm, then you can start like griefing your team and doing really stupid stuff to try to get really good logs, but that's not too important. So it's about having good expectations, etc., right? It's about good expectations, and just playing it clean, playing your class intelligently, play it well, and that really is the simple truth. Okay, yeah, to get like the top log, the best log in the world. On some fights, like, absolutely, you will be cheesing it and doing weird stuff that you probably shouldn't do. It's not good for your team. But for the most part, you know, if you can play the fight well, if you play your class really, really well, you're gonna get, you can get an absolutely top log without doing anything crazy. It's just about playing really well. So there you go. Guys, I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what else you'd like to see, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.